Hello?
Hi there, can you open this door, please?
For what?
I just want to make sure that everything's okay. There seems to be something going on.
What do you mean?
I don't know, I just figured I'd check on something.
I don't know what you want, man. Get out of my house.
Open this fucking door! Where's your daughter, man? Where's your daughter,
What are
man?
you talking about?
Where's your daughter? Who's in there with you?
Bro, if you don't
Open this
leave,
fucking door. Open this door, I'm breaking it fucking down. You understand me?
leave my house. You don't.
Are you okay? Is everyone
We
in
are
this house
okay.
okay?
What? Everyone's okay. What do you want? Can you leave my house, please?
Can you open the door, please?
You have nothing to do with my house. Can you leave my house?
You know what my name is?
I don't know who you are. You don't belong to this neighborhood. That's for sure.
This is my neighborhood, though.
Yeah, I live there. I don't know you.
My name is Harry Dresden, motherfucker. Open the door. This is my neighborhood. Open the fucking door. Now, or I will fucking end you. Do you understand me?
I can't make this shut up. I like to say, call on your blood, Yahweh, Bashim, Ashab, Bashim, Kakadar, stubble, honor to the apostle, El's great, most peace, I teach you, full like Shalom. And yeah, this guy is insane because smashing into somebody's door like that and trying to, break in their house for no reason really just shows you the times that we in. And I first seen this video like a few weeks ago, and it was I know this brother Arrows of Indignation, he first shared it amongst the brotherhood at one point. And this video was also, pretty much gaining popularity on I think it started where people were sharing it on Reddit or so, but I know for a fact that it was on Instagram. And it's pretty funny when you first see it, but it's like it's insane to see that how somebody could just pick and target a random house for no reason, just out of nowhere, and then at the same time act and cosplay like a fictional character, and then have a moment where they just crash out completely because you didn't let them in your house and they're a complete stranger. And then the funny thing is, the guy that did this, like, his name is not really Harry Dresden. His name is Jason Thomas Nichols, and he's pretty much arrested, and they gave him like 4 felonies, for doing such a thing like that. And apparently in the house, there was a wife and kid, which was not even a daughter, it was a son. And the father had to come to the home, and he appeared to look like he probably was maybe either Middle Eastern, and if he was Jake, he could look like he could, pass for being Issachar also, potentially. But, other than that, he had to fight that intruder with a shovel. and then eventually get the cops to come to the place. And you see, that man, at least, he didn't end up killing the guy for breaking into his home, which I would say he would have all right to do so, because you don't know the man's intentions. And the man broke in through the glass door, and the way he was acting on the Ring camera was really crazy. The video seemed funny how he crashes out, but it's really like, if this shit was to happen to to you personally, I know, like, to anyone for that matter, it wouldn't be funny if they had to go through something like that, because you don't know what this nigga's capable of. He's wearing a whole trench coat, and you could clearly tell he's not in his right state of mind. And California is a state where, there's no stand your ground. And I'll say about that nigga that did that, and that claims that he's Harry Dresden, that nigga really, if he was to go in the hoods of LA and try that shit, he would have known, better. So he's not really, so even if he's all that crazy, he want to pick and choose where he want to diffuse and act, crazy. And he chose a house in the suburban area to do so, where things are where crimes are less likely to happen. Had he done it in the hoods of LA or California, I kid you not, that nigga wouldn't even live to be behind bars. He would be in the spirit world, guaranteed. And then let me bring out some scripture Lord will makes us edifying. It says in Matthew 24 verse let me see, verse 12, it says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And going to the word cold is going to cycle. So you definitely see that a lot of people, they're becoming psychopaths, and they are naturally just pretty much reducing their love that they've once had, and now they're losing it. And ultimately, these Edomites are, like the elites and these Rothschilds and Rockefellers and these banking families, they're making life harder for people. So eventually people are resorting to, crashing out as their last resort, because either they're gonna lose what they once had, or they're losing what they had in the past. And they say when you have nothing left to lose, you lose it. And this guy was said to have some sort of mental health issues or so, and he eventually decided to target a house to do this type of thing. And out of all type of clothes to wear, he got the nerve to have a Demon Slayer shirt, which this man clearly had the legions of demons on him to even be this, upset of the fact that he can't enter into a stranger's home at his will. So he decides to break in through the glass door and act like he's fighting a villain from the Dresden Files or so. And I'm gonna bring out another precept. It says in Ephesians chapter 6 verse it's like Ephesians chapter 5 verse 15. It says, see then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Yeah. So, at this point, it's like, you gotta really be on your guard and on your P's and Q's, because shit, people like that are just, it's insane to even see that you could act like this in broad daylight. Just imagine if it was a nighttime. What this nigga would have been capable of doing. And luckily, the woman that had a kid in the house, luckily the man that she was with, her husband was there to come into the house in time and confront that crazy ass man for breaking into the home. And the biggest concern is the fact that a lot of you women out there, you claim that you don't need a man and claim that you could pretty much live your life thinking that you have protection because you could call the police and all that shit. You know, we in the times where people are just raging and crashing out, even while society's somewhat intact. You know, you got cameras out there. People don't give a fuck. They still doing shit. And very soon it's gonna be to a point where there's gonna be so much crimes going on that nobody's gonna give a fuck about, you know, about the police. And eventually the police are gonna see that there's so much crime that they can't even, you know, keep up to with the reports and trying to de-escalate the crime. So they're gonna eventually have to, you know, give up and protect their own families and just do what they gotta do for their household and for themselves ultimately. And that's the times that we coming into. And they say in the reports that he was considered a sex offender, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, because he was molesting a child or so. And that was before he did that that crazy shit where he tried to break into this man's house, which he actually did broke into the back door. And it's Second Ezra chapter 15 is the last precept I'll bring out because I don't want to make it less long. Just want to make sure. Verse let me see. Verse 14, it says, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, invading one another. They shall regard their kings nor princes, but the courts of action shall stand in their power." And verse 19 says, "A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread, and for great tribulation." So just imagine that man wasn't there, and we was in that time period that it's prophesied in the scriptures about, Jacob's trouble, and all the other precepts out there like Ezekiel 7 and 216, that correspond with this, and I believe in Jeremiah 30. You see, people are just not going to have no sympathy. They're not going to care. They're just going to do whatever comes to their mind. And like I said, they already don't care about a camera already being at the front of your door, even though it's still good to have anyway, so that you could, identify who's, if they're not wearing a mask, which people do crimes even without their mask, which is, I find stupid because you could still get arrested and charged. And people just taking these risks like it's normal. Like it's a walk in the park, like it's nothing. It's just like when my one of my security guard supervisors at my site told me at the site I work at, even though, we work at a different department, we don't work because, him being security and me working in office, two different things. But I remember he said something like having a camera doesn't necessarily prevent the crime. It just shows you what's going to happen later on. And he's 100% right. Because sometimes, like, shit, at least if someone was wearing a mask, to try to conceal their identity, to the best of their ability, it would be understandable, if they're doing a crime. But some people don't even think like that. They just don't give a fuck. They will just do it, even being unmasked, like it's nothing. It may prevent the severity of how they do the crime. Maybe. It may prevent that. Like, they may not violate because there's evidence of what they do, and they'll get caught up, because the camera's there. But other than that, you gotta be circumspect and you gotta walk with that wisdom, because if you see people are just moving this reckless with cameras, imagine if it's a time period of a blackout, and those times will come where it's going to be a blackout and cameras are going to be off, and during the daytime and nighttime there's going to be all type of people out here just purging, doing whatever they possibly can to fulfill their wicked desires. And in that time period, if your woman don't got a man, you're just through. And regardless, if anyone doesn't have the protection of the Lord, for the most part, you're just through in general. So yeah, with that, I'd like to say, call on Yahweh Shem Shabbat Shem Kakadash, double honor to the Apostle Elsbury Millstone, peace, I teach, and full Shalom.